Alex here, and welcome to today's YouTube video. Today I'm going to be talking about some really specific fursuit making tips. These are all just really little things that aren't really big enough for a video of their own, but lots of people may not know about them or might forget about them, so I thought I'd do a little compilation of all of them in one video. To start with, especially when you're hand sewing, make sure to double tie all of your thread knots. This is really important for hand sewing because it doesn't have the same strength as if you're on a machine. So make sure you always tie all of your knots twice at least so that you don't risk your seams coming apart. I would also recommend doing this if you're machine sewing as well. Not quite as necessary, but I like to do it because it just adds a little bit more security to the ends of your seams. When you're patterning something, depending on the design of course, most people would just pattern one half if it's a symmetrical design. This is for, heads or bodies or tails or whatever. Make sure that you flip your pattern pieces, and the flipped piece is going to be the side that you taped, if that makes sense. So I will try and remember to add a little video in there to show you what I mean.
I'm hoping that this makes a bit more sense, but basically this is my pattern piece for the muzzle. It goes like that, and you can see this side where the masking tape is, that's the side we want the fur on. We want it to go up. This side will be down against here. So to make this pattern piece fit here, we need to flip it over on the fur so it's down, marking out that side, and then when it's cut out, it'll be flipped over and the fur will be on that side. And then of course, to get it on the other side, it would be flipped, so we wouldn't flip it. I hope that makes a bit more sense. I know it's really confusing, but give it a go and you'll see if you're any good.
Something I've seen quite a few makers not do, which I find actually quite important to make sure that your suits look nice and professional and clean, is to match your thread colours. When you're sewing anything that is going to be shorter fur, it's really important to match thread colours to the colour of the fur, otherwise you can see it poking out between the seams. Bodysuits is not quite as important, or anywhere that there's long fur, so tails and things like that, but I would really recommend that always try to match your thread colours as well as you can. It'll, at the very least, go for a black or a white, depending on if it's a light colour or a dark colour, but try and always get, if it's blue and green, purple, whatever, try and get a matching thread colour. It just looks so much nicer. If you're like me and you work out of a bedroom just as a hobby, kind of just whenever you can, this may be a problem for you too. Try not to sew when there's no light. It can be really difficult to actually see, especially with dark fur colours, and if you're sewing with dark thread as well. If you're sewing when it's dark or there's no natural light or you have very poor studio lighting, it can be a lot easier to make mistakes and lose where you're up to and so just get all confused. So please try to sew in bright light where you can see everything, and make sure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you're just starting fursuit making and you're shaving your first head and you've gone over it and it's gone, well, this is taking a really long time, surely I'm doing something wrong. You're probably not. Shaving can take a really long time. And of course this varies between clippers and brands and all that kind of stuff, but generally you do want to go fairly slowly so that you don't make any mistakes, and go over things a couple of times to make sure they're all even. Be patient when you're shaving and realize that it does take quite a long time, and just don't settle until you're happy with the product. This is another tip for very beginners, but make sure you test your thread strength. There's all sorts of different types of threads, and some are better than others. If you're just getting really cheap, like $2 thread from the craft store or the dollar store, whatever you have, most of the time it's probably not going to be strong enough for fursuit making. The best way to check is honestly just to grab it and pull. If it comes apart with your hand strength, then you don't want to be using that for anything like paws or heads or anything that's going to be, moved or touched or squished, because it'll probably just come apart. Generally, I like to use a upholstery thread because it's really strong. It's almost like a braided type thick thread. I don't know, I guess it's used for upholstery, so like chairs and things. I like to use this because it's really strong and I cannot break it with my hands. But the other option is just using higher quality cotton or polyester threads from brands like Gutterman or, and I cannot think of any other. But basically, if they're not just like no-name brand, random threads, they'll probably be okay. But just test them, just pull it and see how strong it is, whether it snaps or stretches, just to be sure that you're using good quality materials for your products. Make sure that you are aware of your seam allowances. The seam allowances are going to differ on different parts of the body and depend on whether you're hand sewing or machine sewing. For hand sewing, I generally don't actually leave any seam allowance because I like to sew nice and close to the edge. The best thing to do, I find, is that if you draw around your pattern pieces with a thick marker on the back of your fur, and then cut around the outside of the marker, you can use the width of the marker as your seam allowance. So you get maybe 1 or 2 millimeters of seam allowance, which I find is pretty good for just blanket stitch. I use this for my heads and for parts of my paws that I hand sew. When machine sewing, it's good to leave about 1 centimeter. This just makes sure that your machine's not going to eat it up or fall off the side or create a bunch of problems. Going along with that tip, make sure you trim your seam allowances. This basically just applies to machine sewing or if you're doing a straight stitch with hand stitching. But make sure you trim your seam allowances back so that you've just got, I don't know, 1 mil or so that it doesn't stretch and rip. But you do want to make sure they trim back so that they lay flat and that they're not digging in or poking out or anything, and they just look nice and smooth. Of course, some makers do overlock all of their seams. I do not, so I cannot give any advice about that. I'm sure there's videos somewhere about overlocking fursuits, but that's not something I know much about, so sorry about that. Again, while shaving, it's really important to look after your clippers. They're not just going to last forever if you just use them, put them away, use them, put them away, use them, put them away. You've got to make sure you clean them and look after them. The main things are to clean the fur out of the actual teeth. Most clippers I find come with a little brush to clean them out, so make sure you do that after every use. With mine, it also gets quite a bit of fur stuck in the actual mechanism, so you've got to take off the whole clipper head and clean on the inside as well. Make sure you're checking this, because otherwise you'll end up with a huge amount of build-up and your clippers aren't going to work properly and you have to buy another set and it's not going to be fun for anyone. But you also need to make sure that you oil your clippers. Most clippers, again, do come with an oil, but you can purchase it separately if they don't. Basically, you want to oil, I don't know, every couple of uses, I would say. If you're like constantly making like heads, probably after every head, really. Just depends on how much you're using them and whether they feel like they're getting sluggish or not. Just keep an eye on them and make sure that they are oiled at least semi-regularly. One last thing is, don't be afraid to be inspired by other people's work. It's really important in any art form, especially when you're starting out, to look at other people's work to know what you want your work to look like. This goes for art or sculptures or painting houses, I don't know, anything that's creative based. It's really good to look at other people's work so that you know what looks good and what you think looks good, so that you can apply that to your own work. Now, I'm definitely not saying steal other people's designs or bases or techniques, but looking at images for reference is completely okay. Everyone's inspired by something, even if they don't know it. So I definitely recommend just hopping on Google or Instagram or even Pinterest and just looking up, I don't know, 2D fursuits or blue fursuits or fursuit eyes or whatever part that you want to focus on. Just Google it. Look at what other people are doing. Write down things that you like about them and then apply that to your own work. It'll help you improve and it'll help your style develop on its own as well. And it's just a really good place to start if you don't really know what you're going for. That's all the little tips I have for today. I hope some of these have been at least a little bit helpful. If you have any other weirdly specific fursuit tips, pop them in the comments below for people to see. I'd love to know them as well. I may end up doing a second video on these, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye!